Was geht ab, Leute? Konst Fischer von Konst Fischer Mixing hier und ich heiße euch herzlich willkommen zum SOUNDCHECK TechTalk, der SOUNDCHECK-Ausgabe 4 2021. In diesem Jahr feiert einer der größten Hersteller für Audiotechnik 96-jähriges Jubiläum, und zwar die Firma Shure. Shure hat mit ihrem Produkt Musikgeschichte geschrieben und vor allem Künstlern dabei geholfen, Musikgeschichte zu schreiben. Und genau deshalb haben wir für euch in der SOUNDCHECK 4 2021 ebenso die Story 96 Jahre Shure für euch abgedruckt. Und weitere Details der Shure-Geschichte erfahrt ihr jetzt vom wandelnden Shure-Lexikon, dem Shure-Historian Michael Pettersen. Viel Spaß. So Michael, welcome to the SOUNDCHECK Tech Talk. Where are you at the moment right now on this planet?
I am in Evanston, Illinois,
Okay.
about 1/2 mile from Lake Michigan.
Okay.
And I live in Evanston because that was Shure's headquarters from 1956 to 2004.
And what time is it right now?
Right now it is 9:04 a.m.
Oh, all right. We're at 4 p.m. at the moment, so we're like half a world away. So, Michael Pettersen, you are a historian at Shure. Can you please tell our viewers a little bit about you and yourself, your personal history at Shure, and how you became the Shure historian?
Oh my gosh, do we have enough time? Thank you. It's an interesting story.
Okay.
I have a degree in music theory, and I had hoped to be a music professor when I graduated. And then I found out how difficult it was to get such a position. So I said, well, this isn't going to work. So I thought about going to work for a manufacturer of musical instruments. I'm a guitar player for many, many years. I have an interest in electronics. And so I was born in Illinois and said, well, maybe there's some companies here in Illinois that would do that. So I looked around the time. At the time, there was Gibson Guitar was actually based here at the time, and this is mid 1970s.
And you wanted to go there?
Yeah, well, at first, I'm not a Gibson player, but that's okay.
Okay.
There was a drum company, Slinger and Drums was here, and Shure was here. And I owned a Shure microphone, and I owned a Shure phonograph cartridge, and I thought that might be an interesting place to work. Now, what I did was unusual, though. I just showed up at Shure one day without an appointment.
Okay.
Wasn't looking for a job, and I came into the Human Resources Department and said, hi, I'm here to learn more about your company. And they said, well, what job are you here for? I said, I'm not here to get for a job. I'd just like to learn more about your company. They had no idea what to do with me. And so they called out an HR manager, and they said, would you talk to this weird kid? And I go into the office, and he starts talking to me about it. And I had done research. I owned product. There were 5 or 6 Shure microphones in the office. I said, oh, that's this model, and that's this model, and that's this model. And the president is this person, and so forth. And they said, you seem to know a lot about this company. And he says, excuse me. And so he goes away, and he comes back and said, would you be interested in a job in our sales department? And I said, maybe. And so I went away, and about 2 days later, they called me, and they said, we'd like you to come back for an interview. And so I came back for an interview, and they hired me, and that's how it started out in 1976. So I've had 5 different jobs at Shure. Okay. I was in sales, I was in marketing, I was in engineering. For a short time, I was in what's called advanced product planning.
Okay.
And then my last job, my final job, I should say, is a historian. And that was actually, I started to get interested in that concept about 1995, but they actually made it an official position. The first time we've ever had a historian was in 2016. And it's the best job I've ever had.
So you've done it since 2016?
Right, but I got interested much earlier on than that. I mean, I had been studying our history probably since around 1995, maybe.
Okay.
Mrs. Shure and I put together a history book about Shure that was published in 2000. It's about 400 pages, by the way.
Great.
And that really got me interested. And then I started learning about it just because it interested me, not because I never thought it would become a job. But there we have it.
So what does the historian do? You know everything about Shure, or like more than all the other people?
I think that's the best way to do it, because I tell you, I learn new things every day. For example, just give you an example. In an off-site storage facility, we have 500 boxes that have not been looked into since 1955. I have no idea what are in those boxes. And that's one of the things I'm trying to do is go out there and, COVID has kind of stopped that now. But when it doesn't, I would go out every week or every other week and look at a box and see what we can find out. So I'm finding out new things every day. So I write a weekly, what we call a tech tip. It's really a historical tip. It's for internal people about interesting things I find out about Shure. I do interesting podcasts with people like you. It's just, it's interesting to me because I don't know if this was going to happen or not, but COVID seemed to really bring out people's interest in history. I can't explain why, but it really has. And so I was kind of in the right place at the right time where people said, tell us more. You know what I think of this concept? I think people like to be told a story. How did we get here? How did we come from here to there? So I do that. A lot of writing, a lot of research. I also get involved in a different part of Shure's company, and that Shure is a very interesting company. Is that when Mr. Shure and Mrs. Shure was alive, they gave away the vast majority of their wealth, giving to cultural institutions and humanitarian institutions and so forth. We still do that now. In fact, we're kind of a for-profit company that's run for the benefit of charity. That's the best way to think about it. And I get involved in giving some of our products to charitable organizations. So that's another aspect of it. There's a lot of different things. And the other thing is that...
So you decide who gets it? You decide it or you give it away?
What usually typically happens is that the executives decide how much we're going to give to whatever. And then my job is to make certain that the product they get is actually what they need. Because many times they say, hey, I want this. I said, no, you don't really want this. You want this, and so forth. So I get involved in that. And then the other thing is that if we get a weird email or a weird phone call or a weird request, they always come to me. We don't know what to do with this. Give it to Michael. And one other thing I do is that when COVID's not happening, I give tours of our facility in our headquarters in Illinois. And we have a museum there. And we have an archive which has one of every product that we've ever made since 1932.
Great.
So
those are daily tours or once a week or?
No, it's pretty much industry tours, and when I get requests, special special customers and so forth like that. But we're not doing them now because of course COVID we opened and now we closed down, and well, you know how that goes.
We will see how future plays out.
Yeah.
So we're a little bit about we're meeting here because it's Shure's just gotten 96 years old. 96 years old.
Yep.
And what do you think were the key moments that made Shure the company it is today? Like 96 years is such a long time.
Yeah. There's a few things. Of course, when we were founded in 1925, that was a one-man operation. We were not a manufacturer of microphones originally. We distributed radio parts. We distributed parts to build an AM radio, like as a hobbyist. One of the very most important things that ever happened was in 1936 we hired an engineer, and his name was Benjamin Baumzweiger. He later shortened that to Bauer. And Ben Bauer came in 1936. He was 24 years old. He had just graduated from college, and he changed the entire company. I mean, his first invention, can you imagine this? His first invention at age 24 or 25 was the Unidyne microphone. At 24 or 25, I'm trying to figure out how to write a sentence, and he's inventing the Unidyne microphone. He stayed with us for 20 years.
Can you tell us, just the viewers, shortly, what the Unidyne made for the whole audio industry to this day, or what it meant to this day?
Right. So in 1939, we bring out the Unidyne microphone, and it was important because a lot of the listeners will know it as the Elvis microphone, the microphone that Elvis always used. But what was important, it was a directional microphone, a unidirectional cardioid shape for your technical people, that was done only with a single mic element, and it was a moving coil element. It was a dynamic element. And before that, you could make a microphone directional, but you would require two elements, and they would you had to combine them electronically. So this made it less expensive and more reliable to make. And it became a success very quickly. There was Unidyne 1, that's the larger version until 1951. The Unidyne 2 was in 1951. We still make the Unidyne 2 today. And then there was the Unidyne 3, which is the SM58 and the SM57, and then that came out in the mid-60s. So this is a product that was invented in 1937-38, introduced in 1939. 2021, we're still making it. In fact, last year we sold more SM58s than we've ever sold. This is just astonishing. Can you imagine Apple bringing out a phone in 1939 and in 2021 they sold more than ever?
I find it actually pretty awesome that that the SM58 gets sold more than ever in a year where there's no live playing anywhere. That's kind of weird, but it's awesome because it's an awesome mic. You can use it for anything. I mean, its name is Studio Microphone, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, but that's what we thought it was going to be, but we were wrong.
A little bit, yeah, right.
So Ben Bauer, Ben Bauer, absolutely a very important part. World War II was really important too, because all of a sudden we started manufacturing products for the military, but we had to build products to military specifications, and a much higher quality and standards than consumers. And when World War II ended, Mr. Shure said, I think I'm going to keep these military standards and use them for consumer products. That was never done before. And if Shure is not known for anything else, we're known for durable and reliable products. And that goes all the way back to our experience during World War II building military products. And we still build products to military specs today. That was important. Our first wireless microphone in 1953. Wow. Can you imagine that? That was important.
It was tube-driven, right?
What's that?
It was tube-driven, right?
Yes, it was, yeah. 5 miniature vacuum tubes inside of that. Can you imagine that? Kept your hand nice and warm when you used it, right? And then, of course, Unidyne 3 came out in 1959, and that's the basis of the SM58 and the SM57. Phonograph cartridges, phonograph cartridges were a big portion of our business from 1937 to 2018 when we got out of it. In fact, when I started at Shure, phonograph cartridges was the biggest portion of our business by far. So that happened. And then something that wasn't so good for us is the introduction of the CD in the early 80s.
Okay.
We almost went out of business because we were relying so heavily on phonograph cartridges that all of a sudden a CD came, and within 2 years nobody was buying vinyl anymore. So I lived through that, and why I didn't get fired, I think I was young and cheap. That's what they kept me. And of course, then getting back into wireless microphones in the mid-'80s. So those are some of the highlights. There's been many, many more. 96 years. It's hard to select ones that you don't want to talk about. Of course.
What do you these days? I just wanted to go one step back. And the Unidyne technology, just for our viewers, is like the technology which is still used in 95% of all the microphones in the world of
directional
manufacturer. That's actually the awesome thing. It's like everybody copies it. Yeah,
it's axiomatic, meaning that it's essential to how microphones work. And once you get the idea, it goes, oh yeah, that's right. So in the United States, a patent, or patent, as they say in the UK, lasts for 17 years. And after that, it's opened up. Okay. So once it opened up, everybody could use it. And pretty much every microphone manufacturer in the world now uses some variation of that, what we call the uniphase acoustical principle, to make the microphone directional. So yeah, it's amazing. It was just something that, looking back, it looks so obvious, but he was the first one to think about it.
And with this whole bandwidth of products, what does Shure specialize or focus these days? Like, you have still so many products, from headphones to wireless, digital wireless, analog wireless, anything. You have anything. But what is like still your key business stuff?
Right.
Or is it everything? Is it just everything?
There are a few things. First of all, I think to really make it simple for the viewers, our primary business is transducers, something that takes an audio signal and turns it into an electrical signal, or the opposite, takes an electrical signal and turns it into the audio signal. That's our specialization. So that leads us to headphones and earphones, which of course that we make for professional and for consumer. That leads us to microphones. Wired microphones are still a really important portion of our business. Wired microphones got us through the last year because wireless microphone sales almost cut in half because there was no touring sound and so forth. But during normal times, let's say non-COVID times, wireless products are about 60% of our business, and that's wireless microphones and in-ear monitors. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they're expensive, and that's by dollars, right? So, I mean, Axient Digital, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 for a single channel.
That's a lot of SM58.
Yes, that's a lot of SM58s. You're correct.
Okay. Great. How when the company started out, it was started by Mr. Shure.
Mm-hmm.
How did he start the company? What kind of businessman was he? What were his? I know you sold
radio parts
and stuff, but what was his vision? Like, I'm selling radio parts and getting the biggest audio company in the world.
Yeah, I don't think he ever envisioned that. So a little bit of background. So his uncle, Nathan Shure, had been in Chicago since around 1890 and had made a very, very successful catalog company that sold household goods, cooking utensils and pots and pans and anything you needed for your household. And so it was called the N. Shure Company, and that catalog company was fairly large, and Mr. Shure's father was also involved in that business. Mm-hmm. So Mr. Shure, our Mr. Shure, he graduated in 1923 with a university degree in geography. He wanted to be a geography teacher.
Okay.
And much like me wanting to be a music professor, he had a hard time getting a job as a geography teacher. And so after a couple of years, I think his father probably said, "Come on, son, time to do something with your life." And Mr. Shure looked at the catalog.
Geography is great.
Right, exactly right. I'm laying at home getting paid, right? So he looked at his uncle's company that was a catalog company, and he said, maybe I could do a catalog company that sold radio parts. So his first office was in the building that his uncle's catalog company was in. So he kind of took the business model from the N. Shure Company, except he sold radio parts. So it was a one-man operation. And from, I think maybe he added a couple employees. In 1928, his brother joined. So that was, our Mr. Shure was S.N. Shure, which stood for Sidney Natkin Shure. And then his brother, Samuel Shure, joined the company in 1928. And then they changed the name. They changed the name to Shure Brothers Company. Interestingly enough, his brother only stayed for 2 years and left in 1930, but we kept the Shure Brothers name to 2000. I don't know. Maybe we had envelopes and letterhead we had to use up. I don't understand that, but no matter what. But what happened was, by around 1929 or 1930, you could buy radios pre-made. You didn't have to build them anymore. And there was the great economic depression that was happening around the world. So our business, or Mr. Shure's business, really started to decline. And he had to figure out something new to do. So what he did was he looked at new technologies. And in the early 1930s, new technologies were electronic recording studios as opposed to acoustic recording studios were new. Early experiments in television were happening. Two-way radio for police and fire communication, that was new. Public address, amplifiers was new. And he looked at it and said, all these things need microphones. So maybe I can distribute microphones. Now remember, he's not an engineer. He's a geography major. So he found a local company in Chicago that made microphones, but had very, very bad sales distribution. So that company was called Ellis Electrical Labs, and Mr. Ellis and Mr. Shure signed an agreement, and Mr. Ellis manufactured the microphones, and Mr. Shure sold the microphones. So if you see the earliest Shure microphones being sold, they say Ellis Electrical Labs. Mm-hmm. And then what happened after 2 years later, Mr. Ellis and Mr. Shure had a disagreement about how to do business. Mr. Shure said, well, I want to stay in this microphone business. And he hired his first engineer and started manufacturing our first mics in 1932. So that's kind of how he fell into the business, if you will.
And how did he go on? Like, what were the whole ideas like? Let's go in this market. Let's go more in this market. Was it more a decision of what the engineers made and then said, "Hey, I just made this, market it," or did he have the ideas?
I think it's a little
and said, "Do it."
I think it's a good question. It's a little of each, I think.
Okay.
When Ben Bauer came, Ben Bauer had so many ideas that I think that he opened Mr. Shure's mind to all kinds of things that it wasn't there. About 6 or 7 years ago, I found in one of those boxes we talked about recently, I found the lab notebooks that Ben Bauer had written from 1936 to 1945.
Okay.
Handwritten. And they had not been seen for about 60 years. It was in a dusty old box, and I opened it up and went, "Whoa, look at this!"
Awesome.
So I read through all. It was like 500 pages, and I read through them all. And that guy, every day, that guy had a new idea, every day. And so I'm pretty certain that Mr. Shure was talking to Ben Bauer every day, and Ben saying, we could do this. We could do this. We could take this microphone idea and make a phonograph cartridge. We could make this, and we could use it for accelerometer and so forth. And so I think Mr. Shure was a very good judge of people. And so he surrounded himself with smart people who had lots of ideas. And they said, yeah, let's do this. Yeah, let's do that, and so forth. I think that's how he did it.
That's awesome. And Ben Bauer, he's known for this Unidyne idea, but what were his other big things he did for Shure, which is not as much known that Ben Bauer did it?
Right. So he was there for 20 years. He left Shure in 1958. And during that time, he developed all kinds of different microphones. The Unidyne is most famous, but he also developed the controlled magnetic element that's inside our green bullet microphone, the harmonica microphone. He developed, at least 20 or 25 different types of phonograph cartridges and needles and tone arms to play things like that. He worked on headphones during World War II for aircraft flyers and so forth. Anything that had to do with transducing and audio, he seemed to invent. So I think, just to give you an idea, Konst, when he died in 1979, he had over 100 patents in his name. Most people are lucky to have one patent for their entire. He had 100. So if you go back and look at Shure catalogs in the 40s and 50s, pretty much everything in there was some influence of Ben Bauer, including the wireless microphone. I have a memo at Shure, 1947, where he writes, I've got this idea of getting rid of the cable between the microphone and the amplifier, and I think we can put a radio transmitter in it. Man, I never met him. I do know his two sons, but I never met him, and I really regret that because he just was such a genius. Kind of a hero to me.
I guess so. He's kind of a small heart of Shure, of
Very
course.
much so.
If he wouldn't have invented the Unidyne, who knows what would have happened?
Maybe I agree. I think right. I think I think if Ben Bauer hadn't joined Shure, we may not be in business today. He was that important.
And looking back at the development of microphones, do you think microphones still keep improving, or have we reached a peak, or what do you think? What are the next steps in microphone technology? Or where are we now?
Yeah, I don't know. Every time I've asked that question and I answered it, I'm always wrong about 2 years later.
But that's good, actually. That's good.
Yeah, right. Most of the technology that we use in microphones today were established years and years ago. The first carbon microphone, not used so much today, but that was like 1850, 1860. Condenser microphones were first developed in around 1916, 1917. So a lot of it is evolution, being able to make it smaller, being able to make it quieter, being able to make it less expensive, for example. Now you have microphones on chips. The little MEMS microphones, which are no bigger. Two of them can fit on my fingernail. There really hasn't not in the time I've been at Shure for 45 years. There really hasn't been any new transducer technology, the new way to take from audio or from airwaves and turn it into electricity. It's all been improvements of the same things. So it's a little hard to predict. For me, one of the greatest things we've done recently is these microphone arrays, which go into the ceiling and have, in a 1 meter by 1 meter square, have hundreds of microphones, and literally they all work together and they kind of aim the beam as people talk and move it back and forth. When I first heard of that concept, I thought it was pretty cool, but I said, nah, they'll never be able to do that. And then when I first heard it, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Now, it requires a lot of software, a lot of firmware, hundreds of microphones. It's fairly complicated. But that's the perfect example of, well, if one microphone can do this, what can 100 microphones do? And
that's a great thought.
Yeah, so I think firmware, and of course there could be also changes in materials. Though the Unidyne microphone is still made today, the acoustical principle is still the same, but there's different materials. We use a mylar plastic diaphragm instead of an aluminum diaphragm, and we do laser welding rather than glues and so forth. So a lot of those changes happen as well.
Because you have to, or because you want to? Like, why
both?
The SM7 and now there's an SM7B. Why did you have to? Because the parts were not available anymore. Or?
But that's an excellent. You sound like you worked for a manufacturer. People who don't work for manufacturers don't realize that sometimes you're buying a part or a glue from this company, and that company goes out of business. What do we do now? And you have to come up with things. So many times it's to make it more reliable. That's always number one. Sometimes it's because a company went out of business and you have to figure out a different way to do it. Sometimes, for example, laser welding is quicker and better than using adhesive. So sometimes it's to make manufacturing easier. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of different reasons that we do. The one thing that it's really important is that in my time there, Shure has never done anything just to make it cheaper. We always want to do it to make it more reliable, to make it better for the customers, but just to make it cheaper. Sometimes it makes it less expensive. That's great, but it's never let's make it less expensive and less reliable. No, that never happens. If it's less expensive and more reliable, perfect. Then we win and the customer wins as well. So yeah, there's a lot of different reasons that things have changed. But the microphone business is so strange. I mean, we were just talking about it. With the Apple phone or a cell phone. Oh man, that cell phone's a year old. You need something new. Microphones, 40, 50, 60 years old. Think about this. Think about sustainability. Isn't sustainability the best thing? Buying a microphone and not having to replace it every 5 years? Not throwing that microphone into a landfill somewhere? I mean, that to me is sustainability. I mean, I've got my first SM58. I bought it in 1973. Never bought another one.
And it's still great to this day. That's right. That's like you have to be pretty visionary to have I find it astonishing how you can just create one of the first microphones ever, and to this day it's one of the best microphones ever, mostly used, and it's just a great microphone. It's just a great microphone. You can say about it what you want, and that's so visionary to me. And all the other guys who came let's build a new microphone, have problems being better than the SM58.
Yeah,
what's better? But
yeah, well, it's interesting. The guy who developed the Unidyne 3 was named Ernie Seeler, and he was born. He had a German father and he had an American mother, but he was born in Cuba. Educated in Germany, was in university around 1941 to 1945 approximately. And then came over to the United States. So, if nothing else, for your German listeners, SM58 was designed by a gentleman who was half German, which is pretty cool. It kind of pulls us together. But there's just something about the way that microphone sounds and the way it looks, and it's just the right weight. In the late 1970s, we decided to bring out an SM58. It was called an SM78, but it was a little bit smaller and didn't weigh as much. And we thought that, for example, some artists, maybe young children or maybe women, might want an SM58 that didn't weigh quite as much. Complete failure. Nobody wanted it. Didn't feel
as
right.
good. Didn't feel as good.
Yeah, didn't feel as right. Didn't feel right. So sometimes you just hit the right combination of what it looks like and what it feels like and what it sounds like, and then you don't change it. You can improve it, but you don't change it.
And your engineers did this with like many products. Just like, let's just say 58, 57, SM7. Like, they just hit the button. Like,
yeah,
perfect.
And you know, it's I think so. We're a private company, and by being a private company means that you don't have stockholders or Wall Street saying, "Where's my profits this quarter? Where's my profits this quarter?" We can work on things that take 2, 3, 4, 5 years to develop, and if you're a public company, many times they won't let you do that. You know, we want this out now, and you cut corners and so forth. We don't have that pressure. And I think that allows us to take the time to really make these things as best they can. And that leads to long-term life.
So that's it leads to the one big question. What's the next big thing you can talk about? What's been done there? What can we wait for at the moment, or what does the
I think you're going to see a lot of developments in array microphones, you know, because you can actually change how they operate with firmware and software, which is pretty cool, and just having more of them. So that's in the conferencing scheme. I think there'll be a lot of breakthroughs in wireless microphones as well. Smarter microphones as far as being able to, we already have the ability to note interference and then change frequency really quickly. I think you'll see that drop down in price, you know, just like other technologies coming down as well. Wired microphones, that's a lot harder to predict because that's so much, you're working just with the laws of physics, and those laws do not like to bend.
Yeah,
or change just because you want them to. They won't. So there's that aspect of it. You know, I'm always kind of, in my job now, I'm always kind of looking backwards as opposed to looking forward. That's about the only things I can say that I think will happen. But, you know, then again, if I knew something and I told you, that would be the end of my 45-year career right today.
I'm sorry for that. I didn't want
so I don't want to do that, you know. And my wife doesn't want me at home all the time. So
That's awesome. Actually, I think all my questions are answered. I had a nice little talk. Do you want to say something else to our audience?
Gosh, this is so quick. I enjoyed this conversation. Yeah.
Do you want to tell me something?
Yeah, I think. Well, there's a couple things, perhaps. I knew Mr. and Mrs. Shure really, really well, and they were completely the opposite of some of the billionaires you have today who are building spaceships and have 15 homes around the world and have the fanciest cars and so forth. Now, they could have done that if they wanted to, but they didn't. They chose not to. They had one car, and it was a Buick, which is kind of just a mid-class car. They had one apartment.
All their life?
Pretty much so, just only one. Yeah, I mean, they had to change it as it got older, but they never had they never had a Mercedes, for example.
Okay.
They had an apartment that was overlooking Lake Michigan, a beautiful view. But I was there several times, and they were never. They were there. They lived there from 1958 to 2016, until Mrs. Shure passed away. They never had a big fancy place. So what did they do with their money? They gave it away. They either invested it back into the company, which is good for people that work there, or they gave it to the Art Institute of Chicago or humanitarian causes and so forth. And that's what they love to do. So people said, well, if they didn't want to spend money on themselves, what did they value? And what they valued was education. Both of those, Mrs. Shure and Mr. Shure, were taking college courses when they were in their 80s. Learning was what...
Geography.
I think he knew that. But for example, so he put together a collection of stamps and envelopes that was the world's largest collection of stamps and envelopes from Palestine and Israel before 1948. It was like almost 24,000 items. It was huge. And when he had satisfied himself that he had learned everything that he wanted about this, he didn't sell it. He gave it to the Smithsonian Institution, the largest museum in the United States, and basically said, here, you can have it, and now let it be available to everybody. And you can see it online. If you did a search on Smithsonian Institution SN Shure stamp collection, you'll see it. So he just loved to learn about things. And Mrs. Shure was like that as well. They were really just people that had a very clear-cut way of thinking about life, and it was about other people, not just about spending money on themselves. So, it makes me proud. I've worked there for 45 years. Never once has the company said to me, lie to a customer or hide this aspect of it. Never like that. That was just not their way of doing that. And the other thing to think about is that the company name, it's his family name, right? It's not Microphones Incorporated, which I can hide behind that. It's my family name, and anything that we do, I want that to honor our family, or my family, and we continue that today. So it's just, after 45 years, you think I'd be tired of going to work. No, I love it.
Because you learn every day, you say.
Every day, yeah.
Every day about a great company that loves giving back to the people, like only making high-quality products,
yep,
and not exploiting people, but giving. That's awesome.
And that's really, I'm going to steal that. That was good.
Please do. Take it. It's yours.
That sums it up very well. And so I really have been fortunate because my father worked in construction, building buildings and putting in floors and so forth. He worked really hard. And he said, I don't want you to do what I did. I said, if you find something that when you get every day in the morning, you go, oh, I get to go to work today. And learn about something that I enjoy, and music and electronics, stuff that I would do as a hobby. And so I've been fortunate and hope to be able to do this as long as I can. And conversations like this make it even more fun for me because you did your research, which I appreciate, and you asked great questions. So this is fun.
Thank you for the nice words. Thank you for the nice words.
Absolutely.
So,
true.
Do you still have any hobbies if you love your job so much?
Well, that's interesting.
I hope so.
Well, I'm a performing musician. Again, COVID aside.
Great.
My wife and I are active choral singers. We actually have performed in Europe and throughout the United States. We've been on a couple of recordings, which is kind of fun. I play every style of guitar you can think of. I play rock guitar. My specialty is big band guitar, like Count Basie and Duke Ellington and so forth. But my hobbies are primary music and the history of Shure. I used to play golf, and then I just boy, this is a waste of 5 hours, and so I don't do that anymore.
Let's get back to music.
Yeah, and really, this is absolutely the truth. Sometimes when the weekend comes around, I'm disappointed because I'm not going to work for a couple days. Now, man, if you're going to retire, you need to retire from something you don't like to do. Mm-hmm. If you like to do something, continue it. In fact, Mrs. Shure said, Mrs. Shure she died when she was 95, and she worked until she was like 94 and a half. Mm-hmm. And I think her best advice to me one day was, Michael, don't ever retire. You will rust.
As long as you love what you're doing, you should, and as long as you can, go on, go for it. Of course,
yeah.
Do what makes you happy.
Well, I see a bunch of guitar. I assume that's a real background. That's not a fake background. I see a Les Paul back there, and
that's not a fake background. No.
Yeah. In fact, I knew Les Paul. Les Paul and I were friends. I met him because of Shure, and he was a fascinating guy. So yeah, and I've got to meet interesting people around the world, like you and like Les, and man, it's just the best. And I hope that anybody that thinks about Shure, if they think nothing else about Shure, they think, there's a product I can rely upon. man, if that's the great, if that's what they think about, then I'm happy.
I'm only happy because you said Les Paul's name and my name in one sentence, so I'm happy about that. It was such a great conversation. I'm so thankful for it. I will write you an email later.
Okay.
But for this podcast, we're done.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'll keep you updated. Later.
Very good. Bye-bye.
Alright, das war's mit dem Soundcheck Tech Talk, der Soundcheck-Ausgabe 4 2021. Falls noch nicht geschehen, abonniert noch fix unseren Soundcheck YouTube-Kanal, damit ihr keins unserer Videos mehr verpasst, und dann sehen wir uns mindestens in einer der kommenden Folgen. Ich freue mich auf euch, euer Konst Fischer von Konst Fischer Mixing. See ya.